Live by your standards. Whatever you are willing to settle for is your benchmark. So if you can have a greater benchmark on cold fries, bad coffee, and a bad cocktail, all of the others naturally escalate. So stop being a settler in your life and start developing standards.
"83% of Americans identify as not very happy, which can hold you back and negatively affect your relationships and your business. On this podcast, we discuss the proven steps to happiness so you can restore balance and rekindle your joy.
Welcome to another episode of How to Be Happier for Entrepreneurs. I've got a pretty credible guest today. I read a couple of his books that a friend gave to me that we're mutual friends with, and I couldn't put the books down. I went through one in 24 hours, and I'm working on the second one now. So Steve Sims, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks for the plug of the books.
Man, your story is so fascinating. We're going to get to all of that, but I like to start out with a hard-hitting question. And look,
Okay.
The first book was Bluefish, right? Can you share the story behind that book and what challenges you faced in your early days?
Yeah, it's going to be a pretty annoying story. The first book was actually called Bluefishing. I had launched many, many years ago, like 25 years. I ran the leading concierge firm for billionaires around the planet. And I've often said it was a Trojan horse. I didn't care about going down red carpets. I didn't care about hanging out with the Pope, Elton John, Elon Musk. I didn't care about any of those things. I wanted to get in a room with billionaires and go, how do you look at your time? How do you hire people? How do you trust people? You know, I've often said that if podcasting existed in the 90s, I'd have just started a podcast. But I didn't. I had to find a way to get billionaires to talk to me. And if they wanted a piano lesson by Elton or they wanted to play drums with Guns N' Roses, then all I had to do was accomplish that. And I got the breakfast, the lunch, the dinner to hang out with these billionaires. So that's what it was. And then I started to get more well-known over 25 years, which was very disconcerting. I'd always been the guy that likes to hide in the background. You know, I'm naturally an introvert. You know, this look, for any of those that can't see me, I'm not Brad Pitt, but this look when you're sitting in a bar doesn't tend to get too many people coming over going, hey, can I share a drink with you? And that's good because I like my space. That being said, if you're cool and you've got something good to say, come and have a drink with me. But I didn't want it. And then one day I'm in a party, starting to feel kind of like a little bit annoyed that my company was getting more famous and I was getting more clients. I was getting more famous, which was kind of bothering me. And I met this girl and she said, you should write a book. And I went, yeah, sure. She went, well, what did you do with this? Because I heard this story about you and Bocelli or you with the Vatican. And I told her this story of what I had done when a client of mine wanted to have an amazing dining experience in Florence. So my job was always to exceed people's expectations and imagination. And I had actually taken over the Accademia della Galleria Museum, which houses probably the most iconic statue in the planet, Michelangelo's David.
I was there 2 weeks. I was there 2 weeks ago with my 16-year-old daughter.
You cannot take a photograph on that and for it to create the right impact. Being stood next to it, you just are in the vicinity of greatness, aren't you? It is. You could watch a video of it on YouTube and you still wouldn't be able to understand the magnitude. And so I had a table of 6 set up at the feet of Michelangelo's David. I had a string quartet. And then as the client started eating their pasta, thinking this was the most amazing thing on the planet, I brought in Andrea Bocelli to serenade him while he had his main course. And I told this story in this party up in New York, and the woman ran off, came back with an older woman, said, repeat the story. So I repeated the story. A week later, Simon & Schuster gave me an offer to write the book. And here's where it gets interesting. I didn't think anyone would buy it. And I didn't think anyone would buy it because I thought everyone was already doing it. You know, I'm a bricklayer for East London. If it's not simple and stupid, I don't do it. If it's complicated, I don't look at it. So I thought, no one's going to buy this book because they're already doing that on how they create relationships and communicate. So I front-loaded that book and I got a massive retainer out of Simon & Schuster. And I don't get very good residuals, if any. Because I had front-loaded it because I quite honestly thought No one's going to buy it. But here's the beautiful thing. Once you've been paid and you know you're not getting anything on the back end, you write the book you want to write. Because you haven't got to try and catch people because you don't care. You get to tell the stories you want to tell. You call it as you see it. You can be as blunt and as brazen as you want. And I wrote that book and thought, maybe my mum will buy a copy and that'll be it. Maybe I'll buy 2 copies just to show off to the kids that I wrote a book. What I didn't expect was that people aren't doing that with relationships, and people aren't doing the simple, stupid stuff. And it became translated, I think, into 8 different languages and a bestseller in countries all over, countries I hadn't even heard of. And I was suddenly getting emails from people all over the planet. It did really well in Asia and India. Obviously did well here, Mexico, Canada. And I realized that people aren't doing the simple stuff. And that was it. So the first book came out, I think it was about 8 years ago. Followed it up with another one last year called Go for Stupid. Didn't ever think I'd do a second. And that's it. I run around the planet training, coaching, and getting people to do the amazing, deliver wow, and to exceed people's expectations and imagination.
Yeah. So Steve, you've got hundreds of these examples, right? But look, the guy, for the listeners, the guy closed down the museum, had a candlelight dinner at the foot of the David statue, and had Bocelli come in and sing. Like, OMG, if I asked you right now to go pull that off, could you do it? And if I said, did your life depend on it, maybe you could get it done. But anyway, a fascinating stuff. I want to go back to one of the first things you said. And you said, I wanted to be around billionaires so I could see how they spent their time. My question is, why?
Because I was pissed off. I left school at the age of 15. I remember going into my college counselor when I was in London, and he sat me down. He made a cup of tea, just talked to me about the weather and how I was, and then poured his tea over to his desk. And I remember he sat down and he went, we've got nothing to talk about. You're not for college. College won't accept you. Go and get a job, Steve. And that was it. My college counselor just couldn't even be bothered to help me. And so my dad put me on his building site, the day after I left school at the age of 15. And I'm on the building site at 4:00 in the morning till 8:00 at night. I'm getting rained on, shit on, cut up, bashed up. So I knew how to work hard and not complain about it. But I'm going home watching people, I'm in a minibus with like about 20 other people, all sweaty and smelly. And I'm seeing people driving down the road in nice cars or going into offices wearing suits. And I thought to myself, I'm working hard, they're working smart. Where's the difference? And I remember this, and this will make you smile. I've always been on motorcycles. I don't have a car. I'm still on motorcycles, always will be, hopefully. And I came out of this pub one night because we'd run out of money for more beer. And as I came out of this pub, this guy pulled up in a new car, and he gets out of this car, opens up the back door and gets a jacket out. Now, all of my jackets were leather. He gets a suit jacket out. So for a start, I'm looking at this guy like he's Richard Branson. And this beautiful girl gets out of the passenger side and he puts this jacket on. It's almost like in slow motion. And I'm like, how come that guy, he's coming out later in the evening. He's probably not worrying about the cost of the beers. He's going to be fine. And it aggravated me enough. And I think aggravation is a great component for every entrepreneur to have because it gets them to do things. And I ran at this guy. I was so aggravated to need to know, how come you're successful and I'm not? What am I doing wrong, fella? And of course, back in the 90s, we didn't have Instagram and YouTube to show how inadequate our lives were. We just don't realize that on ourselves. So I ran over to this guy, crash helmet in hand. And I remember this. I said to him, hey, how come you're successful and I'm not? And I've never seen a man get in a car and drive off so fast. He just jumped. He didn't take his jacket off, yelled at his girlfriend again, and they sped off. And I turned around thinking, why didn't he answer me? Why didn't he help me? And I turned around and my 2 boys were on the floor. One of them literally crying, couldn't open up his eyes. And I said to him, what do you find so funny? He said, look at you. You've just run at that guy with your crash helmet in hand, looking like you do, screaming at him, what are you successful? What do you expect? And I realized that there was nothing wrong with my question. Actually, nothing wrong with my question at all. It was very direct to the point, lacked any confusion, but my delivery was shit. So I realized I had to reframe the question, deliver it differently. But I started a journey to try and ask as many people, just like you do. I tried to get in the right rooms, the right communities, to just be able to go up to someone and go, how do you view success? Are you successful? Do you think you're successful? If so, what is your relationship with time? What is your relationship with relationships? What is your relationship with your spouse, with yourself, with money? And I started being very, very inquisitive to ask all these questions. But as usual, to keep them in the conversation, I had to give them something.
So why you like out of 100 people, 99 of the people are going to keep laying the bricks.
Mm-hmm.
What? And I heard what you said. You got agitated. Why don't more people get agitated? And what advice could you give for someone who's technically laying bricks? Because my partner in life just ended a 25-year job at Accenture. She was essentially laying bricks because she was doing something she didn't want to do because she was fulfilling the expectations of her mom. So why you, and what advice do you give someone to get out of laying the bricks?
Wow, you just kind of answered it. Two things. One, we usually live in the life of our past generation. So our past generation tells us get a job, get a pension, and then retire. So we're living their goals, their dreams. And let's be honest, anything that was relevant 6 months ago is no longer relevant today. And in a year, 2, 3 years' time, we're not going to recognize the planet. So anything that was relevant to our parents 20 years ago shouldn't even be in the conversation. So for one, live your life, not somebody else's, because today's track is different to that track. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and if we ever bump into each other, I'm sure your partner can punch me for this, but she's a settler. A lot of people settle. And that's not a bad thing, but that's where that aggravation comes in. If you're sitting in your room and you go, oh, that wall could do with a repaint, and you settle and go, oh, yeah, and like 6 months, oh, yeah, could. I really need to get around to painting that wall. But when you're aggravated about something, you're like, for Christ's sake, I've got to do that wall. You order the paint on Amazon, the following day you're painting, okay? Aggravation creates momentum. But when you settle, that creates monotony, stagnancy, and you just rot and die. So I'm a great believer in that. But here's how I can change it. Sorry, just to give you the tactics on how you can change it.
Yeah.
From today, understand that you've been living a settler's lifestyle and stop settling and live your standards. Now, this is, you go into McDonald's. I'm not saying you go to a Michelin star restaurant. You go to McDonald's and the fries are a bit cold. Excuse me, can you give me a fresh batch? These are a little bit cold. You go into a bar and you order an old fashioned and they give you a or they give you loads of ice and you go, excuse me, have your standards. No matter what you do, how your car's washed, how you pick up your laundry, how you get your cappuccinos, how you get your stuff, anything you do, live by your standards. And do you know what will happen? Whatever you are willing to settle for is your benchmark. So if you can have a greater benchmark on cold fries, bad coffee, and a bad cocktail, all of the others naturally escalate. So stop being a settler in your life and start developing standards.
I love it. How do you define success in your life?
Luckily, because I've spoken to so many people, it's been really interesting. In fact, the funny thing was, a good friend of mine, Jay Abraham, says to get an amazing answer, ask an amazing question. And when I started going around to rich people, and I knew I needed to ask this question, and I'm a great believer in brevity. I like to ask short, sharp questions that doesn't allow anyone to be confused about what I'm asking for. I'll say to you, hey, Brad, do you want to have a beer? That's it. There's no need to go into any further. Hey, Brad, how many podcasts are you doing and why? Very short, simple questions that get to the point of the question. So when I first thought, right, I'm going to go out and start talking to rich people, I'm just going to talk to them, and I would go up, and I remember the first question I used to ask is I would say to people, how are you rich and I'm not? That was my first question I used to ask rich people, okay? And when I say to you about, hey, how rich are you? You straight away start thinking about a number, don't you? How much is in your stock portfolio? How much is your house worth? What is the monetary number? So if I say to you, how rich are you? You go, 4 million, 3, there's just a number in the
Yeah.
back of your head.
Yeah.
So then I say to you, how wealthy are you? And then when I start talking about wealth, people start talking about, well, I found God and, I married my wife and my wife gave me 3 kids and I'm wealthy because I get to spend time with my kids. And I'm thinking, well, I can't marry your wife and have your kids. So that doesn't help me. So I knew that, again, it was the wrong question. So that's when I started tweaking it to, how come you're successful? And at the time, I'm not. And then I would tweak it to, how come you're successful? And so many people are not. And so I would ask this question about success. And when they gave me their answers, literally sitting on that bar stool, I would go, right, that's how I'm going to treat people. That's how I'm going to treat time. That's how I'm going to treat relationships. So I would always get off of that stool more successful than when I had sat down, because I would start on it. For me, success is choice. It's my choice how I view people. It's my choice who I communicate with. It's my choice to develop my standards. It's my choice to protect my family. So I'm a great believer that success is choice. And a lot of life gets in the way. You may be focusing on your money. And when you're focusing on your money, you're not focusing on your partner. When you're focusing on your partner to try and make up for the money, you're not focusing on your health. And then you're stressed and you start drinking. It's a horrible spiral, and it's plates. You're spinning plates. But success is the choice in knowing what you can control and being smart enough to know what you can't.
Usually when you hear success, the media and Hollywood always attach money to it. And for 47 years, I thought success meant getting a lot of money because I didn't feel worthy. And that's how my dad showed me love. So I thought, okay, if I just make a lot of money, people are going to love me. And I quickly found out, well, I guess not quickly, it took me 47 years, but I found out that, it doesn't, money doesn't matter, because look at all the people who've taken their lives, all these super rich people. So Steve, the most outrageous client request that you ever fulfilled, and what did it teach you about problem solving?
Just one little note. Those lessons, you say that it took you 40 something years to learn that lesson. It tends to do that for all entrepreneurs, doesn't it? We're not actually quick learners. Sometimes we've kind of got to go through that. I noticed something very quickly that poor people worry about money. And that is a very horrible thing to say. And I'm sure a bunch of you are going to start sending me vicious emails, and I don't care. Poor financially, poor mindset, poor standards, poor vision, poor optimism. When you've got a poor mentality, you focus on money. When you have money, you focus on impact. And when you've got the money, you focus on what time you have to create that impact. So if you ever speak to someone, you're talking to them about money and they love that conversation, then you're talking to a poor person. If you talk about value and impact, that's the person you want to be talking to.
Yeah.
Sorry, you asked me a question and then I went off on that rant.
But it made me think of something else. And that's the story in your books literally highlight how you went from rags to riches and how you live this happy life now. And it's not about like going to Harvard or learning some mathematical equations. It's reaching out and learning how to talk to people, how to meet people. Is there anyone in this world that couldn't do what you did? I mean, as long as they're not like disabled or something, can't anyone do what you did?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the thing. That's why I front loaded the book. When Simon Schuster gave me the offer, I came home to my wife and I said to her, they made a mistake. But if they want to make a mistake and pay me, let's maximize the hell out of it. So every kind of like, well, you'll get these residuals, oh, you'll get this. I was like, I don't want those. Give me more at the front end. And I really was convinced that everyone on the planet was doing it. I'm a bricklayer from London. Okay, I didn't go to Harvard. You say didn't go to Harvard. I actually lectured at Harvard twice, which is still funny. But I didn't go to college. So there is absolutely no excuse.
None.
You can't do what I've done and what I do. None at all.
None. And it's not an excuse, but what we do every day, all day with clients is we help them overcome limiting beliefs. you powered through any limiting beliefs you may have had. Some people have this grip on them that I'm not good enough and I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So it can't be an excuse. But once you get the awareness, work with someone like myself or my partner Yvonne, everything can change. So if you're on this journey and you're like, I wonder if I have some of these limiting beliefs, go do yourself a favor. Take 2.5 minutes out of your day. Go to unlocklimitlessyou.com/quiz and take our self-love quiz. It's going to tell you exactly where you are on the scale of self-love or lack of self-love. And if you're stuck in a big way, you probably have some of these limiting issues that we can help you with. All right. So Steve, back to that question. The most outrageous, outlandish thing you've ever pulled off, and what did it teach you about problem solving?
Wow. Okay. So I had a client that wanted to only get married once. So he asked if he could have it done by the Pope. I went through a lot of it. You think the DMV's got a lot of red tape? You try working with the Vatican. So, it was, here was the funny thing. If you look at something and you say about the limiting beliefs, and you're so accurate on that, I completely approve that message. Most of our problems are created by us. And there's a gentleman that I'm very lucky enough to go riding motorcycles with, a guy called Keanu Reeves. You may have heard of him. And he was in the movie Point Break. And in the movie Point Break, there is a line that is repeated by Patrick Swayze, Bodhisattva at the time. And it said that fear causes hesitation, and hesitation will cause your worst fears to come true. And that was in the movie Point Break. And it could not be more accurate today.
Freaking love that movie, by the way.
Oh, it's one of the man movies of it forever. And it's the case of when we get intimidated, we stop and we question. When we start questioning what we're capable of, well, here's the thing. What do you know you're capable of? Here's the ugly side. If your car turns over on the side of a road and it's possibly going to explode, and your kids are in the back of that car, are you stood on the side of the road going, let me think about it? Fuck, you're in. You are in. You're getting it because you action before thinking. Now, that's the thing. A lot of the time, the stuff that we're getting involved in isn't going to be running into a burning car. You're walking up to someone that's very successful and you're going, hey, I'd really like to do business with you. And they turn around, they go, no, go away. And you go, okay, have a good night. Thank you. It hasn't hurt you. You haven't imploded. So when people used to come to me and they'd be like, oh, I'd really like to do this with Elton John, they would always follow it with, but I that's impossible. Can you do anything? And I'm like, well, why not? Everybody in the planet has a why. And I'll give you an example. I had a client that wanted to have breakfast with Oprah Winfrey. And so, I thought, okay, everyone in the world goes to the toilet, everyone in the world eats breakfast. So can't see any problems why this would be a no for a start. So I contacted the group, and I'd never had any introductions to her before. And I contacted them. I said, hey, I want to do this. And I got a bunch of people going, no, you can't do that. She doesn't do that. Why would she do it with you? Blah, blah, blah. The naysayers of the world. Okay. All right. And I realized very early on, if I'm getting a no, it's because I'm asking the wrong question or the wrong person.
Wow.
All right. That was a big eye opener to me. So I'm thinking, okay, if you're saying no, do you actually have the ability to say yes? And most of the time it's no. You're asking the wrong person. You're asking the doorman of a building if you can have a free apartment. They don't have the ability to say yes. So I learned that lesson very, very early on. So I had to find someone that had the ability to say yes. And I went to a whole bunch of people that didn't. And I ended up stumbling on that charitable side. And I heard that she doesn't do private meet and greets in America. Okay, well, that's America. There's this little place called Canada. There's another little place called Mexico. They're really close. So I thought, well, okay, you've given me one, parameter. And then I realized she was doing a big promotion for schools. She was making a lot of schools in Africa. Now, if you go to anyone with money, and this is a test here for you, Brad. If you go to anyone that has a lot of money, what should you not talk to them about?
Money.
Bingo. Good. You paid attention. Thank you very much. So if you really want to see someone walk away, Try to seduce someone with money with more money, and they are just going to look at you like you're an idiot. So what's the value prop? What's the impact? So I went over and I contacted the charitable side again. And I went, hey, I believe Oprah's doing a tour and she's in Canada. Do you remember that clause that she couldn't do it in America? Well, we've got rid of that clause because she's going to be in Toronto on these dates. And yet I know full well she's actually supporting these schools, and the schools are being currently built. That's fantastic. I don't want to donate money to the building of the schools because I believe they're almost done. But how about if every single class had a computer for every single child for the next 5 years? Would that be of interest? And of course, they bit my arm on it. So I went back to my client. I said, here's the deal. You got to do a deal. I think it was Hewlett Packard. We contacted Hewlett Packard and said, hey, how would you like to be in the Oprah schools? And they were like, oh, yeah. So we got a heavily discounted rate from that. And he supplied the computers for 5 years and he got his breakfast.
Amazing. Did you ever figure out why in the world she can't do a meet and greet in the United States?
No, there's a lot of people that have sponsorship deals, and there's a lot of people that just build up these parameters, and she probably just didn't want to. And so I'm sure sitting around a table one day, turned around and went, oh, I don't want to meet anyone. They went, oh, okay then. And then someone came up with the idea, oh, this can only be America. And they were stupid enough to give me that parameter. See, the beautiful thing is when you give someone a parameter, it just gives you a position and a line in the sand. So go in the opposite direction.
I freaking love it. If I'm getting a no, I'm asking the wrong person or the wrong question. Write that down and remember every time you get a no. That is amazing. So, Steve, what are you doing nowadays?
So, I said to you about my second book, Go for Stupid. I didn't expect to write it. In fact, I was very adamant that I would never write a book again. Writing books, as you know, it's like you're doing a therapy session on yourself. And then you have to do the audio version, which is like standing in a toilet reading your own book to yourself. It's all very uncomfortable. So after Bluefish, I was like, I'm not touching that. I'm never doing it again. It's a bestseller. Great. I got the medal and the certificate. That's good enough for me. And then this thing called COVID came across. Now, I mentioned to you that I'm aggravated. I actually get aggravated really quickly. I got a short fuse. And COVID came across and I was like, this is brilliant. I travel the planet, but for now, I don't have to travel. I can stay at home with my beautiful wife and kids every single day. This is a great time for me to focus on my brand, my trajectory. Where am I going? Am I where I thought I was going to be 5 years ago? Because life gets in the way. And I saw all of these opportunities with COVID, and so did so many people. Here's a little fact for you. And I'm not picking on it just because it's a British thing, but you've heard of the BBC, okay? Mm-hmm. The BBC did a survey and discovered that more first-time millionaires were created during COVID than at any other time in our life. Not the real estate boom, not the dot-com bubble, none of that. In the worst sickness of our life, more first-time millionaires than ever before. Why? Because entrepreneurs see opportunity. But how many times did you go on Facebook and people were like, oh, I've just, binge watched The Sopranos. What else shall I watch? How else can I, waste my day? And then I would get people and they'd be stood on there and they'll be like, oh, I hate COVID. I can't go down to the bar. I can't see my friends. I can't go to the gym. When their fat ass wasn't going to the gym before COVID. It was the period of excuses. And I started to get very angry. And I thought to myself, how people's mentality goes to depression. And it just didn't make sense to me. So I started doing some looking into it, how Elon, Jeff Bezos, loads of famous people around the planet, and through our period have handled opportunities during people rejecting them, And so the book started to come about, and I put some more of my lessons into it. Did the book, so I'm out there speaking, coaching, training. And then I thought we need someone to kind of push it a bit more. And probably one of my biggest pride moments was that my son is an engineer, and he will outthink something for a month before actioning it. And I've actioned it before I finished that thought. So we are completely different end of the spectrum. Friend of mine says, Ari Meisel says, get going, then get good. And that's always been my philosophy. But my son always needs it to be nailed down perfect before he'll even start the first thing. So we actually started this project and it failed abysmally. Brilliant, because we got all of this education out of where it went wrong. And then we launched our community, Sims Distillery, which is a very aggravated community. And I'm not pitching it, but I am telling you, anyone listening, you can do more when you've got people around you.
Absolutely.
Find your army, find your community, find your people. And that's what we did. We built our community. And I'm a great supporter of everyone that's in a community. It doesn't have to be mine. Just make sure you get in that community. You may be tough. You may be able to win a bar fight every now and then. But when you got an army around you, you're winning a war.
So that's pretty amazing. And you've dropped some amazing gold nuggets. This whole thing has been filled with gold nuggets. But let's end on, what's the one piece of advice you can give our listeners to help them smash their dreams and limiting beliefs and get to where they deserve?
So this is going to be a quote from my dad. Now, my dad is a thick-headed Irish bricklayer. Simple as that. He's not the sharpest tool in the shed. But when I was working for him, and again, I was like 15, 16 years old, we're walking through London. The guy's a chain smoker. He would literally have a cigarette smoking and he'd have another one in his hand ready for when that one nearly run out, that he could light it up and keep going. It was ridiculous. He always had 2 cigarettes going. And I remember walking down the street with him one day, and he didn't look at me, but he put his hand on my shoulder with this cigarette that hadn't been lit. And he went, "Son, remember this. No one ever drowned by falling in the water. They drowned by staying there." And he took his hand off my shoulder and carried on walking. And I stopped and I thought to myself, what's happened to my dad? Has he just been consumed by a fortune cookie? I was looking around to see if maybe something was on a banner that he had read or something like that. He never, ever brought that statement up again. I ran up to chase up to him once I'd finished just in the paralysis. And he never, ever brought that up again. But I realized very, very early on that we do have the choice as to whether or not we stay in the water. We often don't have the choice when we fall into it. And we make mistakes constantly. And you can throw your pity party for 10 minutes, but you have the choice as to whether or not you stay in that water and drown.
Yeah, and that can be, you have an argument with your wife that goes on for 3 days. You're drowning, right? That was me for most of my life. Now, because of, getting rid of these limiting beliefs, these 3 days are now 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. So beautiful advice. How can people find you, Steve, and how can they find your books? SteveDSims.com. Very easy. Don't forget the D for dashing, and there's only one M in Sims. If you want to reach out to me and tell me you heard about me here, I'm Steve D. Sims on Facebook, Instagram, absolutely everywhere. Anywhere you consume your media, you'll find me at Steve D. Sims. And of course, we mentioned Sims Distillery. Or maybe you want to come and hang with me for 2 days at one of my events, SimsSpeakeasy.com. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Steve. That concludes another episode of How to Be Happier for Entrepreneurs. Remember, I'm on a mission to help 1 million people remove these hidden limiting beliefs that are keeping them from living the life that they deserve and having the relationships and the health and the abundance. So I can't do this alone. I need your help. So if you like this podcast, please share it, please rate it, please review it, whatever you can do to help spread this message. I would be forever greatly. Until next time, love heals all.
Hit subscribe if you don't want to miss out on more life-changing content. And if you're struggling, you don't have to. Go to bradchandler.com/contact. There, you can join the Facebook community of like-minded entrepreneurs, and you'll see a button to schedule your freedom and happiness call. See you on the next episode.